What's going on, guys? Today I want to introduce you to the Catalyst Machineworks Slam Nasty. This is a premium race frame with a budget price. Let's get into it. This is the Catalyst Machineworks Slam Nasty. This is a budget race frame, but with the same kind of quality that we've come to expect from Catalyst Machineworks. They're selling this for $49.95. I think anybody else that would make such a frame, really, you're looking at, I would say, like $80 to $100 for something like this. This is a nice little frame. I just want to show some of the components that you're going to get with it. I'm not sure if these are going to sell separately, but these are a arm protector, and there is a front and a back on these. So if you look, if you happen to snap one or whatever for whatever reason, you can see that the front and the rear are different. The rear has more of the bend up feature here. So these go underneath the motors, underneath like that, and I likely will be building it with these arms. That looks cool. It will change a little bit the way that you take these out. You might have to remove all 4 screws rather than 2. I'll get into that. Alright, so this is the Super Slam Nasty, and they have a 13mm standoff inside of this. There's your measurement. And if you want to change that for 6mm higher, they offer a 19mm standoff, and that will bring you up to, this is 20, so that'll give you 26mm inside for stack height. This to me looks like it's plenty. This is you can get a double stack in here and then slap a VTX on the back, and then if you wanted to, right here on the top, we can get a receiver, or I might even put that on top of the VTX. So I think there's going to be plenty of room to build the Super Slam Nasty version, so that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to go ahead and break this down and then go over the components with you and show you how to build it. So in the packaging, we're going to get a flip stick. This is going to go on the top of the quad. We've got our front and rear arm protectors. These will help protect the camera and your antennas and whatnot. We're going to get the Tpu Camera Mounts. We get the top and the bottom plate. We're going to get the front and the back plate. We're going to get a TPU. This is both a receiver antenna and a VTX antenna holder. We're going to get 4 arms, and they have removed one of the motor screws just to save weight. And they have also determined, and many racers have determined, that you do not need 4 screws on a motor. You only need 3. Comes with screws and standoffs. So for the Super Slam Nasty version in this kit, they supply us with, these are 13mm standoffs. From the looks of things, we can get 2 boards on top of one another inside of the Super Slam Nasty. So that's the direction I'm going to go. So let's go ahead and put the base of this together, and then we're going to continue on with the build from there. Okay, so first we're going to start with the base, and as you can see, this is the same carbon material that they make all their other frames out of. And just to prove that, this is a $350 frame, if I remember the pricing. This is the Catalyst Machineworks Tasmanian. This is a Beast Class frame, and as you can see, this is the same exact carbon, if I can get the weave to line up. Yeah, so So like that. Something like that. Yeah, I mean, you get the point. This is the same stuff. Obviously, the difference here is this is a pinch bigger, but again, different frame entirely, but the carbon is identical. So the base of this is 3 mil thick, and these arms are a massive 5 mil. The top plate is 2.5, and these front and back plates 2.5, and I believe this is 2.5 as well. Yeah, 2.5. So this is the same great carbon that we've come to know and respect from Catalyst Machineworks. So when looking at this base plate, there's two things that we want to determine. We have to figure out the top and the bottom, and we also have to figure out the front and the back. The top and the bottom has these countersunk holes for the arm screws. So that is the bottom. We want the smaller side of the screw facing up. And then the other thing that we want to know is the front and the back. The front has this large section of material, and the back has a small section of material. And our mounting for the chips are going to be right here. This is a 30 mil or a 20 mil. I'm going to be building it with a 30 mil stack. Now that we've figured out the top and the bottom and the front and the back, we also have these plates here. We want these press fit nuts to face up. We want the teeth to face out of the quad, and then to figure out if this is the front or back piece. The back piece has these little cutouts for zip ties. So this piece is going to sit right there. The same thing with this one. We want the teeth facing forwards, and we want these press fit nuts to face up. And then this has this wide open gap over here. This is for the camera side. So this is the front, and this is going to sit just like that. So once we establish that, you want to grab 4 of these screws. We're going to take these screws and place them through the bottom into this plate. And I find it's best just to give a couple turns just to hold it in place. Same thing, we're going to use this inside hole here. Place this up through the bottom, and then just give it a couple of turns. And that's now attached. We're going to repeat the process here for the back one. We're going to use this hole and this hole, same thing, inside hole. And I'll show you why that is in a moment. Just give this a couple turns just to capture that. There we go. Now the reason I say do it like this is because on these arms you can see there's a hole cut here, and then we have a cutout hole here. So when we're placing these arms in, we can just kind of press them in, get it on that screw, and then rotate it in place like that. Then finally we can place our screw here and capture it. Next, we want to take note as to which direction these arms face. As you can see, this is like this or like this. We want the nubs to face the front and the back of the quad. These nubs here. These guys here. And so as I'm building this, I am not taking weight that much into account. I'm a freestyle pilot at heart, building a racing frame, so I did not look at the weights as heavily as a racer would. And the reason I bring that up is because of the motors I'm going to put on it. These are the BMS Racing Series motor from T-Motor. These things weigh 32 grams a piece. So these things are massively heavy. They are a racing motor. These are 2000 kV. But I'm just surprised at the weight that these things have. But they look gorgeous. So they're going on this build. So with that, if we notice, we've got the 2 holes here and the single hole here. What we're going to do is the supplied motor screw we're going to place here, and then the elongated screw that Catalyst Machineworks sends to us with these is going to go here and here. So to do that, I'm going to take this guy here, place it underneath the motor arm, and what I always do is just a little dab of, this is Loctite, just coat briefly the threads. I really feel that on a build with 3 as opposed to 4, we're gonna want Loctite on this. I'm just gonna take this and give it a slight snug, and then get this ready for our next one. What we want to take great care in doing is making sure that we do not want to hit the stator with the screw. We want to make sure our screw is well into the base of this motor, but we do not want to hit that stator. And then once we have those set, we can go ahead and give these a snug down. And then finally, we want to put our remaining screw. These are the ones that came with the T motor. These are a little bit shorter. And once we line this one up, we can give that a snug. There we have it. Finally, what I'm going to do here is I am going to take a piece of clear string tubing and put this over our motor wires. And continue that down and push this over our arms. Flatten out our motor wires nice, and then we're going to cinch this down with the heat gun. It's a Betaflight heat gun. The links are down below. So that's our first motor installed. We're going to repeat that process for the second one. So a little pinch of Loctite, and we're going to use this outside hole. We want to denote the back. And we're just going to turn this guy just a little bit just to hold the motor there. Next, we're going to take our bottom plate. Once we have those in and we are sure we're not cross-threading, we can cinch them down. Just going kind of hand tight here. That Loctite should hold them in place. Okay. Now we want to put our shrink tube on this one as well. This is a 2-time shrink tube. I'll put the links below. I usually like to use a 3-time shrink tube, but this is going to be more than adequate for what we're trying to accomplish. And I just think the clear tube looks awesome. Place that over our arm like so, and grab our heat gun and polish that off. The setting I'm using on this is 6 and 2 clicks up. Now, some of you are probably looking at this going, well, why didn't I run the wires through this hole here and run them underneath? And especially that would make a lot of sense if you didn't have this bar here. The issue with doing something like that is if you were to hit something again and again and again, you're going to hit that wire, which is going to be wrapped around the edge of that carbon, and you're going to slowly chew into that wire. So I highly suggest running it on top like this. You could put the shrink tube is going to be pretty good. If you really wanted to, you can put a piece of prop or a couple layers of tape, and that'll help keep these wires from prop strikes. But I would take the risk of putting it on top over putting through here any day of the week. So now, once we're set with this, you'll see how this works out. This is just perfect. So you can see we've got these two fork type ends. And if we set it up like this, we just want to push this plate up so that there's a gap here, and we want to get one side ready. Then this other side, we just kind of roll in place, and it will fit perfectly in place. Once we've got that, we can flip it over and go ahead and run one of our screws in place. Once you get that in place, turn it to the other side, push it in place, and run that second screw in. Once we have all four in place, we can cinch down. This is a 2mm hex driver for those of you who are wondering. And with these screws, I highly recommend something with a flat tip. If you've got one of the ones that's rounded, you're going to have problems. These are very, very good screws, and you will destroy your hex tool should you not have a good one. Okay, so that is the front of our quad complete. I'm gonna go ahead and repeat this process for the rear. So now that we have our motors installed with our protection arm, we can go ahead and separate this. What we want to do is latch this. There we go. We want to set this in there, and we want to capture this screw inside of this little cutout. Once we capture that screw like that, we can roll this whole thing around and then capture this screw here. We want to capture that right in there. Pull it right around and push it in place. And you can see that we have captured each screw. Once we have done that, we can flip this upside down and put our remaining two screws inside the arms. What is nice about this design, this is all completely flat. So we're not going to chew up our battery when we put it on the bottom and the battery ejects in the event of a crash. We have our motors installed, our arms are installed to the main body of the quad. We need to install our PDB. To do that, we're going to be looking at, we have a section of 30 by 30 mounting holes, or we have a section of 20 by 20 mounting holes. I'm going to use a standard size 30 by 30 mounting ESC. This is a Dal RC rocket. This is a 45 amp 3 through 6S ESC. And if we notice, this kind of fits just perfect right inside there. The issue that you'll run into, well, most people will put their battery leads on top like that. I'm going to do something a little bit differently, and I'm going to put them on the bottom. And what that will allow us to do is have the wire run right through this little hole here, and then we can connect our bottom mount battery, no problem. I'm going to go ahead and pre-tin the undersides of these pads. This is the T15 D12 in the FM 2027. And we're just going to go ahead and place a little bit of solder on each of these pads. That's all set. I'm going to go ahead and pre-tin all the motor wire pads. Clean soldering iron tip. As you can see, once it starts to dirty up, you start getting bad solder joints. This is a T15 ILS. This is a very small tip. As you can see from the top of this pad, we have our ground, our power, our current, and motor 1 through motor 4. The underside of this does have a Molex style pin header. I don't trust these at all. What I do trust is my soldering. So I'm going to take their motor wires and I'm going to solder them direct to these pads here. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and pre-tin these. And again, I'm using this tiny little soldering iron. This is about as small as you can get without getting a micro tip, but this should be plenty ample, as you can see. So I'm just going to go ahead and pre-tin these. We want to be very careful not to hit the ones next to it and bridge these. So we want a very clean soldering tip. And just a light pinch of solder per each. We start ice cream coning like that. We need more flux. We're pretty good. I am going to double check those, absolutely. Next, I'm going to take their pin header section that they came with it. I'm going to cut this later, but right now I'm just going to strip and pre-tin the ends of this. Just go ahead and pull off a lot. Once we pre-tin these, we can cut them down to the length that we need. cut them to the length that we want, which is extremely short. Okay, so first we want our ground wire. And that's it, there's your ground. Next we want our voltage. This is going to power our flight controller. And again, take your time with stuff like this. This is tiny little soldering. Our next is our current wire. Got it. Next we want our motor 1 wire, which, because we're going to cut these, it doesn't matter which one at this point, at least on this end.
Motor 2.
Motor 3. And finally motor 4. Once those are set, we want to break out our multimeter, and we want to make sure that we did not cross those pads. So I'm just going to turn this on. This is in a DC voltage, and I'm just checking continuity. So when I put these two together, we get a beep. So straighten out these leads. So we want to make sure none of these two are connected with one another, and it looks like we have succeeded. Okay, for this next part, I'm going to go ahead and grab the XT60, and we're going to go ahead and strip this back. I already cut this a little bit shorter than it had come, and I want to strip this back really no further than the length of the pad. So in this case, I'm taking about a 1/4 inch off. And I'm going to go ahead and twist the ends. And then once I'm set with that, I'm going to stick this through here just to hold it. And I'm going to go ahead and pre-tin. I have changed to the 1.6 millimeter chisel tip for this. And once they heat, the solder will just flow right in. Go. We're going to repeat that with this. Sometimes you want to touch the tip of the iron with the solder just to get some molten solder to help really make the whole thing molten and to get the solder to flow. So that's all we want to do there. Now that that's all set, I'm going to grab our PDB, and I want to hold that in such a way that this will line up. So this is going to sit like this, right like this. So to solder it, I'm just going to flip both of these over, solder it, and then flip them back. And to hold that in place, I'm going to bring the quad hands back. that. And then we're going to hold the PDB up here. Take the frame. And we're going to do the negative lead first. Place that right there. And just apply heat. We get this joint molten. Alright, we're just going to take our wire and apply heat. We want to make sure our solder tip is good and clean so we can get the proper heat transfer. And once this gets hot, it should transfer that heat to the board and kind of sit right in place. Just like that. And sometimes I like to add a little bit of solder, which I'm going to definitely do right now. Let it sit for a little bit to solidify, and we're good. That is our XT60 attached to our PDB. Next, I like to take just a little piece of black tape, and I'm going to put this right underneath where the PDB sits, and this is just because I do not want the main power leads coming in contact with the frame. And if they should, this will give it a little bit of insulation to keep any arcing from happening. This is not a cure-all, but this will help. And that guy just sits right there. Just like that. Now that that's all set, you can see, or maybe you can't, our leads are nowhere close to the carbon, and just in case that this does get pulled down a little bit, there's tape there to prevent them from hitting. So now what we want to do is seat this in place. So we're going to take this and take our supplied nylon. I'm going to take our supplied nylon screws, and these are about 11 millimeter. I'm going to go ahead and say these are 12 millimeter. So now that that's all set, and we verified that our main power leads are not going to contact the carbon, and if they do, they're going to contact that little piece of black tape. So that's all set. What we're going to do next is grab our supplied 12 millimeter nylon standoff nuts, screws. We're going to go ahead and place those inside, and then we're going to top those off with the nylon spacers. And we're going to go ahead and screw those on. I'm going to repeat this process for all four. And we don't need to go too nuts cinching these down. Okay, so next we're going to straighten up these motor wires. So to do that, turn the quad sideways. go ahead and grab the outside wire, which is going to become the inside wire. We're going to wrap these around, and we're going to cinch them right there. So what I want to do is figure out just how long we want it. I'm kind of eyeballing it, grabbing it with my fingernail. And then I'm going to clip it off. And I'm going to strip back just as much as on the pad and pretend. Once that's done, I'm going to grab my tweezers and go ahead and connect it to this first pad here. Get the connection good and hot, and she'll fall right into place. That's number one. We're going to repeat that process for the remaining wires. Okay, we'll repeat this process for the remaining 9 wires. And that is our PDB installed. Next, we're going to go ahead and take our flight controller. We're going to figure out which way is forward. So our flight controller is going to sit like this. So the next thing that we need to do is find a home for all these wires. So we're looking for a power, a ground, a current, and then 4 signal wire. So what we need is the signal wires, and as you can see in the corners here, we've got signal 2, signal 4, signal 3, and signal 1. We're going to go ahead and pre-tin those now, and for that I can still use this same chisel tip. This is the 1.6mm chisel tip. Hit signal 4. Signal 2. Signal 1. Signal 3. Okay, we've got our current wire. We'll go right here. We've got a ground right next to that. We'll use that. And lastly, I'm going to use VBAT. Okay, now that that is all set, I'm go ahead and install this on the quad. Okay, once I know the approximate length of this, I'm going to go ahead and cut right about there and throw that off to the side. Alright, so the way this works is we've got the first wires we need: VBAT, ground, and current. So let's grab those wires. That's the black, the blue, and the black, the blue, and the red. And I'm going to drag those underneath all the remaining wires. Just like that. Those are going to come out the side. I'm going to place this on here. And the first wire we're going to go with is the VBAT wire. I'm going to wrap this around here and cut this to length. And then strip a piece off, pre-tin, and solder it on. Okay, so that's set. Next, I want the current wire. Check length on that right there and cut that to length. Same thing with the ground. We will also cut that to length. Okay. Then we're going to strip. And pre-tin. Okay, now that those are set, I'm going to place those in place. So our first wire is the VBAT wire. And I'm going to nip this just a little bit. Okay, first wire we're going to attach is VBAT. Okay, next is our ground. And finally, our current wire. Okay. Next, we're going to need our signal wires. So we want signal 1 first, which is this guy. So signal 1 should come down here. Just going to get placed right there. Next is signal 2. Okay. And finally we got signal 2, which is going to go right here. And signal 4. We want to just double check that this is 4. So a special note that we're doing this all in a way that all these wires are running in the same direction, so that in the future, should we need to work on this, this board flips forward. You're not going to have wires going from one side or the other where it's going to hinder you from lifting this flight controller off. And lastly, signal 4, land right there. Okay, and that is how to install the flight controller. So as you can see now, if we need to get to the underside of the board, we just flip it this way and everything's good to go. So next we're going to go ahead and install the camera. For that, we want to go ahead and grab the 13mm standoffs and the 8mm cap head screws. And what we're going to do there is install them right in these 2 screw holes and right in these 2 screw holes. The standoffs go on top and the button heads go through the bottom. These are turned with a 2mm. These are turned with a 2mm Allen key, hex key, whatever you would like to call it. So we got the 2 fronts and the 2 back standoffs installed. Next, we're going to take our Tpu camera mount material. And to install these guys, we're going to take the flat side and place it towards the camera, and we're going to take these rounded portions and have them facing forwards. I find this is the easiest way to install these. So we want a 1.5mm hex key, and I'm going to go right in the center of this TPU. And then this way I can line right up with that hole. These are a tiny little M2 screw, so we do not need to go too tight with this. I'm just going to cinch it down. If we go too tight, we will absolutely strip everything out. Then we come over here and place this right on top of our standoffs. And then we can adjust our camera tilt at a later time. And that is how to install the camera. And that is on there extremely secure. So the way this camera works, we have our power wire. This is 3 to 36 volts. We have our ground. We have our video wire, which is the yellow. The blue wire is the VBAT wire. And then this red and green, the red is our TX and the green is our RX. This is so we can control the camera via a UART. So I'm going to go ahead and hook that guy up first. And the only spare UARTs I see, oh, there's right there, we got C and R, but I'm going to do this a little bit cleaner and try to do this on the back of the board and run these over to here. So on the back of this board, I have R1 and T1 there, and I know I saw like a few of them down here. Yeah, I got right there. We got T3 and R3. I think I'm going to use those. That's what I think. So I'm going to cut this wire relatively short, right about here. And I am going to be removing this camera to do this. Next I need our VBAT wire, I believe is the blue one. So the blue, I'm also going to cut the same length, and that's going to go on the bottom. Very good. And then all that stuff, cam 1, cam 2, 5 volt, and ground. Okay, that can go on the top. So perfect. Now that we know the length of that wire, I'm going to go ahead and remove this camera so we can flip this flight controller completely over. And I'm going to pull this Molex out of the back. So now I'm going to flip this over, and we can have access to the pins that we need on the other side. Go on ahead and pre-tin those. And now I'm going to pre-tin the pads. So this we want VBAT, TX, and RX. So we're going to use R3 and T3 and VBAT right there, all 3 in a row. If I can get to T3, that would be awesome. Okay, so the way this would work, you want RX to TX and TX to RX. So this green wire on the back of the camera is an RX, so that's a receive, so we need to hook that to a transmit pad. So that's going to go to T3. Maybe I'll put it right under there if you want to. Okay, the red wire here is a TX. So we want to hook this to an RX. And let's go underneath those wires as well. Oops. And finally, this blue wire is a VBAT wire. And we're going to go ahead and hook that right there to the VBAT. Perfect. Move this to the underside. With our remaining wires. Go straight to the camera here. So the camera's going to sit there. These wires here, we have our camera wire and we have our ground and our power. So those are going to go right here. I've got C1, C1 or C2. This flight controller will handle up to 2. And I just want to make sure that after I've cut that, that's going to be perfect. So, go a little bit longer with these guys. Okay, same thing here. I'm just going to strip just a tiny bit off. I'm talking like a 1/16 of an inch. And then I'm going to go ahead and pre-tin. So what's nice about this particular board, if you wanted to build a cheater quad with this flight controller, you can do so. If you just wanted to do some cool stuff, if you wanted to make like a tow truck quad, there's a lot of capabilities that we can come up with a dual camera system like this. I am not going to use it for that function, so it's just another pad, but the option does present itself. So next I need to pre-tin these pads. We're going to use camera 1. We're going to use the 5-volt pad, and we're going to use this ground. Everything right in a row. We're going to go ahead and cinch this one down. Camera wire right there. Our 5-volt wire is going to go right there. And finally, I want to land our ground right here. So that is our camera is installed. And I like to just give that a couple of twists. There we go. So that's nice and neat. So this is the TBS Unify Pro 5.8 race. This is the version 2. I'm gonna go ahead and install this one. See about holding this. Yeah, perfect. So on these, the wires come pre-tinned, and I don't usually pre-tin the pads. So it's just easier to use a through-hole design in such a manner if you don't pre-tin. Next, we need our ground. For that, I'm going to use a black wire. Yeah, so if I pre-tin, I can never get into these holes. There we go. Okay, next we have our 5-volt out. because we are powering the camera off of the flight controller, we're not going to use that one. So we go to our next wire, which is the audio wire. I'm sorry, video wire. I had the right wire, I just said the wrong thing. So the video wire, this is going to go to our flight controller. Hold that in place there. And solder you in place. Next is the smart audio wire. And for that, we are going to use, we'll use green. Oh. I pretend, but not very well. Okay. And that's it. We are not going to use the data line because we are not running Crossfire on this machine, so we are not going to be able to control it via Crossfire. And the data line would be the TX line on this, and this is the RX line. So this has got to go to a TX pad. So there we go. That's our 4 wires installed on the race. And they supply us with this little sticky pad. The only issue is this sticky pad is not gonna conform to the top of this flight controller. So what I'm gonna use is this stuff here. This is VHB tape, and I think 1 or 2 layers of this will work perfectly. Yeah, 1 layer of this will work perfectly. So the trick that I use with this backing is I get a really sharp tweezer, stick it in between the backing and the sticky, and then just kind of pull it right off once you get a good grip on it. Just like that. This is very sticky tape. Okay, now that we have that all set, so we know we got our ground, we got our power, our ground, our video, and our smart audio. Once that's all set, we can go ahead and stick this guy right on top of the flight controller, like so. Perfect. Now, we want to wire this guy. I'm going to go ahead and pre-tin these guys down here. This is a VTX wire pad, and this is a ground pad right next to it. Take this video wire, and this goes to the VTX. We're going to go ahead and hook that right there. Go ahead and cut this. And pre-tin. Just like that. And fire this guy right here. Clean iron tip. Okay, next to that, we're gonna run our ground. Same thing, cut and pre-tin. There we go. Next, we need a TX wire. There's a T2 pad right underneath here, so that's what I'm going to use. It's very hard for you guys to see this, but there's a pad right underneath here. Okay. And finally, this last wire, I'm going to run off a VBAT. And there is a VBAT pad right here that we can share with the one that runs to the camera. So let's do that. Just place a little bit more there. And anytime we're doing two wires down at the same time, this could get difficult. Here's where it helps to be ambidextrous. Yep, difficult. Okay, that's better. Okay, so now that that's all set, we've got our camera all set. Let's go ahead and install our camera. We go ahead and plug it in first. And place it in place. And at this point, we can now adjust our up tilt. And make sure none of our wires are connecting. Finally, we want to install the receiver. This is the RXSR. This thing's been around for a while. It's actually the last one I own, so this will be the last quad I build with the RXSR. I will change to Crossfire from now on. So with this, we have our ground wire, we have our 5-volt wire, we have our smart port wire, we have our S-bus wire that's out, and then we have our S-bus wire in. We are not running a slave, so we do not need our S-bus in. We can remove that wire. So what I'm trying to do is lift this little plastic piece here. Just get underneath it, just a pinch. If I can do that long enough, then I can go ahead and just pull that wire straight out. Chuck that out. So that's that. Next we can plug that into the receiver. And with where we're gonna stick this, I think we're gonna stick this right here and run our antenna wires. Yeah, I think that's where this is gonna go. We tin this ground pad here. And pre-tin this 5-volt pad here, this receive pad here, and this transmit pad there. And that's where that is gonna go. To leave me the option to do across the top and put it there, I'm gonna cut this much wire. And then finally strip and pre-tin all these. Solder on the ground pad. And we need our positive pad. Finally, our S bus goes to a RX pad. Oops. Tight squeeze. There we go. That is our receiver installed. Next, we need our antenna wire. This guy, I'm going to take the nut and washer right off. So this guy, we're going to put straight through the back of this. And you can splay this out to really get a push on it. Once that's all set, we put our lock washer on there and our nut. Run that guy all the way down. Okay, once we got that, we're going to bend our antenna wire to fit into our VTX. Snaps into our VTX like that, and then this will all sit right inside of here. What we want to do is make sure we're not crunching our motor wires into anything down there. So that should fit like that. Now before we button this up, I got one last thing to do. So we got our capacitor. Where the heck are we going to put it? So when we're working with a tight build like this, and we are down to the last little bits of where are we going to put everything. Okay, we got our receivers going here. All the rest of this is being taken up with the antenna system, which is going to sit like this. And we're really in the middle of a 3D puzzle. Well, how do we fit this? We need it. We need clear video on this build. I would like to put it right here. But how do you do that with these? Well, let me show you. These are called Waffle Caps. These are called Waffle Caps. We want to make sure that we have the square side. We got the square side on the negative side of capacitor, and then the round side will be the positive side. Now all we do here is we take and solder the waffle cap directly to the top of the capacitor. just like that. And now you can nip off these legs. And now we have pads that we can solder our wires to. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pre-tin those pads. And if you do end up bridging these pads, it's not that big of a deal. And when I say bridge, like these two are okay to bridge and these two are okay. That's why I didn't care about that one. Install this right underneath here. And to do that and to hold it taut, I am going to put a piece of VHB tape right underneath it. So I've applied a little bit of conformal coating to that to keep it from shorting out so something touch it. And now I want to take this and stick it in place. What I'm going to do is I'm going to run these power leads directly under the PDB, in between the PDB and the frame, straight to the back of the quad. I might stick them in between the PDB and flight controller. Sneak those through there. And then sneak this guy underneath. We're done with that. We can go ahead and put the camera back on. And as you can see, the camera just rides above it. Look at that. Now we have our wires back here. And get them in the proper orientation, and as you can see, our pad is conveniently right there. So I'm going to go ahead and cut our wire, strip and pre-tin. And finally, we can land these guys. I'm gonna do this ground first, only because it's on the bottom. And finally, our positive wire. And that is a connected and hidden capacitor. Next, we can go ahead and mount our antenna system. To do that, we want to run our RXSR antennas. You can see right here, there's a little hole in this antenna system. So we want to figure out what side is going to be what. This is where it's going to sit here. So I think this antenna will go here, and then this one will go here. So to do that, I'm going to place this one here. And we just run that right up. Just like that. And then we repeat the process over here. Once you get it lined up in that tube, it just sails through. Now that our antenna wires are in place, we can just kind of start that into place. And then I'm going to feed this antenna wire down into the quad. At least that's the hope. And get our MMCX connector connected right like that. Perfect. And now it came out. Put that antenna in there. Alright, so once we have that antenna system all set, we can take our top and squinch it down. We can have our, it actually looks like our receiver will just fit here, just kind of shaking in the wind. I do have double stick tape on it, but I don't think it's necessary. I don't think this thing's going anywhere. I will attempt to stick it down though. So once we get that receiver stuck to the top plate, we can go ahead and run these 4 screws to the top.
Back to the front, idle up.
And just snug them down. And finally, I want to install the Luminer Axi 2 5.8 stubby, and that just screws on right there. So that is the completed Catalyst Machineworks Slam Nasty. And my God, is this a nasty looking quad. I can't wait to fly this thing. It's 2000 kV motors under 6S. Ugh. Ugh. Wow. I'm going to top that off with a set of Dow Cyclone 5050s. This thing's going to scream. So this is a completed Catalyst Machineworks Super Slam Nasty. I can't wait to get this thing in the air. This thing's gonna be fun. I built it like a drag racer instead of like your typical whatever racer. I mean, this thing is, she's stout. It's like a 282 grams finished. Yeah, I'm not gonna be competitive racing against other racers, but maybe a drag race, this thing should blow pants. So I am super stoked to have this thing complete. Eternally grateful for Catalyst Machineworks for sending this frame out. I had initially contacted them and asked if they were able to get me a pre-release version to get this video out to you guys, and they were kind enough. They just sent me the frame in exchange for this video. That really doesn't change my view of this frame at all. I love it just the same. So if you enjoyed this video, click that thumbs up button and leave me a comment below. Let me know, what do you think about this frame? Is it just another race frame or is it something special? $49, you really can't go wrong, right? What do you guys think? And if you haven't done it already, just go ahead and punch that subscribe button because you only get to do it once and it's fun. And I'll catch you later. Peace.